Chinese biopharmaceutical firm CanSino Biologics announced recently that their COVID-19 vaccine, co-developed with a Chinese military research team, had received special one-year approval for military use. CanSino says the vaccine tested well in phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, but without phase 3 tests, the vaccine cannot be given to the broader population. Are we now closer to a commercially viable vaccine? To find out, I'm joined from Shanghai by Professor Chen, Executive Director of the Asia-Pacific Studies Center at the East China Normal University, and from South Carolina by Dr. Kaustubha Qanungo, Lecturer in Biological Sciences at Clemson University. Welcome to both of you. Professor Chen, I want to go to you first. What do you make of this PLA vaccine? How close are we to a commercially viable vaccine?
Well, I think this is actually, one of the most encouraging piece of news in our combat against the disease caused by the coronavirus. I think actually, obviously, the outcome is actually the result of a joint venture, between Canada and also China, the CanSino, company, and also the PLA Academy of Military Science, led by the military, infectious disease expert, Dr. Chen. So actually, I think this is actually a very successful example, of international collaboration and also, collaboration between the civil sector and also the military sector of the international community. I think actually for now, obviously, the vaccine is still limited for the military use only, and not allowed to be for wider commercial or even civil use. But I think actually by the time once actually it has been proven to be safe and with efficacy, it will be translated into civil use or even commercial use. I think actually the fact that the approval has been made for the vaccine to be used within the troops, is a clear indication that it has got the potential, to prevent the disease from, spreading, and also, the efficacy and also safety has been proven to be, of its validity. So I think actually, in time it will definitely be shortly, to be translated into civil use. That's one thing, and obviously also procedurally, because it is actually the joint venture between the CanSino company and also the Chinese military academy. So actually, I think the Chinese, the Chinese military at least partially has got the intellectual property right to the vaccine. So definitely, for some wider use, there will be some approval to be sought after, from the military, logistics support department.
Well, like you said, this is a joint effort, a joint firm by China and Canada, and as far as we know, this firm, this vaccine has obtained approval from the Canadian National Research Council to conduct clinical trials for COVID, but so far only phase 1 and phase 2 trials have been conducted. Some questions are throwing out there saying that are the Chinese military skipping phase 3 trials? What does that mean in terms of how far are we from this vaccine reaching the market?
Well, I think actually the phase 1 and also phase 2 trials have been conducted, which actually means that actually some results or outcome has been obtained to ensure actually the vaccine is efficacious and also is safe. That is very important. So obviously, the troops, the PLA troops, is actually undergoing another period of their use. Whether it is a testing, whether it is still on trial, we're not sure, but definitely I think actually this period is of critical importance in that it will turn out to be quite critical to prove that the drug or the vaccine is of promising potential to cure the disease, to prevent the disease.
Right. Dr. Qanungo, welcome back. In your opinion, from your vantage point, how hopeful should we be about this vaccine? How promising this vaccine can be?
Yeah, so at this point, we have to rely on the published data. And we are at this point a little bit limited about that. So in the Lancet, the first phase 1 clinical trials have been published. And it just was kind of an okay trial in the sense that about 50% of the population that was studied in a phase 1 trial, they had the side effects, which is a fever, headache, muscular pain, and that is common in many of the vaccines as well. So the second clinical trial, or the phase 2 clinical trial, that study has not been published. So we really do not know at this point that whether it has been improved from the phase 1 clinical trial or not. So in vitro studies say that it can neutralize the antibodies. So I do believe that at this point, that as the Chinese military has sponsored this study, they are going to test that in a sort of, they are not saying that is a clinical 3 trial, but phase 3 trial. But it may be that due to some of the side effects, it is not yet open to the public. And the Chinese military does have the ability to use it first to see that further what are the side effects and how well it works.
All right, you're saying basically that we'll really have to look long and hard at the results of phase 2, trials, the results of it, to be able to tell how effective that can be, right?
That is correct. And also the way it is that the phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, when the vaccine is given to these individuals, their blood is taken, and then there is a test, which is an in vitro test, which is tested against the virus proteins to see that whether their antibodies can neutralize them. But we really do not know that whether these patients, if they're infected by the real virus, how protected they will be. So it is still a long-term goal, or the efficacy study, that how well it will be. But anything which is being developed is always promising.
According to the WHO, currently there are at least 17 vaccines in clinical evaluation around the world, 8 in China alone. Would you say, what would you say about the technology used, in some or all of those vaccines? And based on your expertise, what other vaccine frontrunners should we be watching out for other than this PLA experiment?
Yeah. So basically what happens that there are several different types the way the vaccines are developed. Some of the old school technology is that you take a virus and you treat it chemically or by different means to inactivate its infectivity, but in keeping its structure, and that is called the inactivated vaccine. This is a classic technology. Another technology is that you use the virus and you replicate it over and over in the laboratory, and gradually it diminishes the ability to surmount a proper infection or outcome of the disease, and we call this as a live attenuated vaccine. So these are some of the 2 gold standard, and there are several companies and laboratories are trying these technologies. Now, as these have been proven for decades, many, many years, the chances of these for approval is a little bit more. On the other hand, there is just only one Ebola virus vaccine, which is vector-based, is approved in the market, although it's a different vehicle or vector-based. But this adenovirus-based vaccine, where there is a vehicle to deliver the vaccine into the individual, or there are some of the companies which are using an mRNA, which will be injected into the individual, which will make the viral proteins to get immunity against it or raise antibody against it. That is a new technology. So the approval may need a little bit more scrutiny in such a case. Just an example that although the Ebola virus vaccine was started almost like 10 years ago, it has just been approved in December of 2019. Almost, it took 10 years. So
Professor
that's
Chen,
one of the things that...
Right. Professor Chen, let's talk about people's attitudes towards vaccines. According to a CNN poll last month, a third of Americans said, for example, they would not be vaccinated against COVID-19, even if it was cheap and available. What do you make of this mindset towards vaccines?
Yeah, I think actually in the recent months since the outbreak of the pandemic, I think there has been, we have been witnessing an alarming demonstration of anti-intellectualism in the West. Some people, some sections of the society have been quite suspicious and always thinking that actually, there's a gigantic, kind of conspiracy conducted by the governments, by some dark forces, against the individual safety and also society's integrity. They think actually, for example, like masks, like the vaccine, like even 5G technology, those are all, some kind of a plots to undermine, people's integrity. I think this is quite worrying. For example, the epitome of such skepticism is President Donald Trump, who actually always has been setting a bad example, about such kind of, suspicious attitudes towards science and common sense. And some gullible people in the West have been, misled and even, go to extremes into, thinking that all those science and common sense are actually quite deceptive. On the other hand, obviously, such, kind of skepticism and also distrust, skepticism of science and also distrust towards the governments will actually be quite disastrous in that actually at this critical time of the, for humanity, definitely I think, science and sensibility is very important instead of holding such kind of conspiracy theory all the time.
Right, there has been a whole lot of conspiracy theories out there. Professor Qanungo, Dr. Qanungo rather, a new study from China showed that COVID-19 antibodies fade quickly in both asymptomatic and symptomatic patients. Does this mean COVID-19 may be even harder to beat than we imagined, even with a vaccine? What if we never find a vaccine? Is that a possibility at all?
Yeah, this is actually was addressed in the Nature Medicine, where the study was actually published, where they see a dramatic drop in the antibodies. And really at this point, we should not be discouraged. It may or may not be. We have to be a little bit speculative on that, because after the infection is gone, usually the antibody titer will go down to a certain extent. That does not mean that there is almost no antibodies. There is just a little bit of amount of antibodies is required to wake up the cells in your body, which will stay for lifelong sometimes, not always, to fight the viral infection. And along with that, there is a second system other than the antibody producing cells in our body, which we call as a T cells. And the study did not address the T cell responses. And in fact, there is another study which told that T cell response or the T cell amount remained very high. So there are two players, key players, which attack the virus. So at this point, we should not be discouraged to a certain extent. There are some examples that due to the different strains that is circulating, we may have to take the vaccine every year. This is true for influenza because there is lots of these strains that come in every year. These are some of the possibilities, but at this point, we don't think that we have a concern about that. And we are just keeping our fingers crossed that something will work out. Our fingers crossed,
we shouldn't lose hope. Thank you both so very much. That's all the time we have. I want to thank our viewers for watching The Point. I'm Wang in Beijing. Thank you for watching.